Welcome back. It's another busy month for game releases. It's seeing smaller scale teams, in the case of Manl Lords and No Rest for the Wicked, actually take on some fairly damn big genres. As always, today's video will be what we find newsworthy, interesting, or just think that you should know about, presented in release order. To make this show better, I'd like to ask you to consider hitting the subscribe button and the like button. Takes a few seconds, zero cost. It gives the algorithm happy signals, and that means that this video can go out further and spread games to more people, which could be very good for them because there's a lot of great games here, and it would be brilliant if more people knew about it. With that said, let's get going. Starting us off, the 9th sees 3 releases, and the first is Gigantic Rampage Edition, and honestly, this is an interesting one. You see, this is a near decade-old hero MOBA about fighting gigantic boss monsters. It's being re-released. It's not a live service, it's not free-to-play, there are not free-to-play microtransactions. If you buy the game, it is just yours. Now, this is a game that was quite liked. It obviously did not find its massive free-to-play audience. But the core idea here, a revival, that means that this game is playable, that comes with some, I think, welcome gameplay changes and no bullshit. Honestly, that's the kind of thing I want to see more of. Next then, Devolver Digital are back. They have a knack for picking up interesting games, and Children of the Sun by Renee Rother is surely that. TLDR, a cult ruined your life, you have a sniper rifle, and it has a bullet that you control directly, and that means stylish kills and inventive puzzles. To me, this one just looks dope. Every time you take somebody down, you get to realign the trajectory of your bullet. So basically, that means yes, action, but also puzzling because you'll be trying to clear stages with as few moves as possible. It looks really cool, and the best news of all is we actually know it's fun, because the Steam Next Fest demo was terrific for this one. Also on the 9th, and very different, Plant Puzzlers. Seriously, games about plants really are taking off, and this time it's Botany Manor. It's set in 19th century England during the Age of Science, where you will be exploring the manor while puzzling out essentially the best conditions for every plant in the collection, and while you're doing that, you're seeping in the story of the manor and the owner of the manor. Honestly, I like these kind of vibe-based games. You're doing something that's relaxing, seeping in a story, and we have a bit of a connection in that, well, my boy Templeton from our game, The Pale Beyond, is in fact a botanist, and if you have played the game and haven't checked out the epilogue scenes that we added in a free update, definitely do that. Anyway, games like this can be just a relaxing palate cleanser, which recharges me so that I can enter the fight again to defend managed democracy. That's the 9th, but the video game onslaught very much does continue the next day with Arabian Shadow Legacy. Okay, this comes out on the 10th, and it is aiming to be a fast-paced blend of essentially like fantasy shadow powers and sci-fi gadgets. You're going through a world ranging from rural plains to multi-layer sci-fi slums, and the narrative hook is neat. Essentially, you're trying to discover what happened to an ancient race, the Arabian, while the planet-running megacorp is trying to shut you down. So I suppose imagine you are hunting for Atlantis while Jeff Bezos' delivery drones try to hunt you down. It's probably not a fair reduction of the game. Anyway, I thought it looked cool. It's a nice little indie scale game. Kind of like the vibes. Next then, April 11th has a game that immediately captured my attention when I saw the trailer, and that is Infection Free Zone. This game has got 90,000 wish lists in Steam, and to me it does kind of look like crack. It looks quite addicting. The game basically is giving you the sort of thing that you want. Building a base and fighting zombie hordes in an isometric setting. But you might think that's nothing new, so why is this game actually popular? Well, there's a twist. This is built, right, using data taken from OpenStreetMap. And that basically means that if you want to see a facsimile of your own town, maybe your own house, handling a zombie outbreak, you can actually do that. And the bit that's also interesting to me is this is made by a team who previously did 112 Operator. So essentially we're seeing people who have cut their teeth in simulation games taking that into the zombie genre. So to me it sounds interesting. I don't know about you, but the idea of defending my home city of Belfast from zombies is quite neat. Next, we've got something utterly unique in the form of Halbot. And good God, just look at this game. From personally having just rewatched Chicken Run, I'm very weak to this. This is a whole adventure game made in the claymation style. It's using real claymation as well. Now, obviously, as a video game, the quality will depend on the writing and, of course, the puzzles are not overly infuriating, as can happen in the adventure genre. There was a little bit of that with some puzzles, but in the Next Fest demo, the comedy and the writing was really, really sharp. Honestly, this game looks lovely. It's keeping an amazing traditional craft going. It's spreading the word about that craft, so I'm absolutely here for it. Our next game is Grounded. It's not new, but the Microsoft-owned studio Obsidian have ported it over to the PlayStation and the Switch. As a game, it's very much not Obsidian's norm, but it is actually pretty great for what it is. Essentially, if you had beef over Bug's Life versus Ants as a kid, well, this and the Empire of Ants Unreal Engine 5 remake that's currently in the works, I think they'll be giving you some nostalgia pangs. Next, we move on to the 18th with a big release in the form of No Rest for the Wicked. This is from the team who have made the Ori games, and if you've seen any of the Ori games, they are absolutely gorgeous. So, No Rest for the Wicked is an action RPG, and it's in a new setting made by that team. It looks gorgeous. There is a ton of gameplay footage out there. Essentially, you're seeing the combat model have quite a focus on positioning, dodging, and parries, which to me is a very welcome change from the norm. Maybe one could say there's a little bit of Soulsy inspiration there. And just graphically, it looks absolutely gorgeous. Now, it is launching in early access. It's not going to have the complete content that eventually will have, but I think the likes of Baldur's Gate 3, Dave the Diver, and Hades have shown us that early access, if it's done right, is amazing. And I think in the case of an action RPG, that actually does work out quite well. So for me, it's the visuals. It's also that this is an ARPG that's not necessarily only for hyper sweat buildcraft ARPG play. It seems like an amazing entry to that genre. I think this just has a lot going for it. I mean, those visuals basically allow its trailers to just sell the game wondrously. Also, I think if you're not a hyper sweat action RPG player, this could be a good pick. Studio Moon seem to be hoping that a grounded, politically driven setting will give people enough of a campaign and a world that you want to follow along with to actually care. And then to further help people who are not the most core ARPG players, there's actually a lot of other stuff, right? Downtime activities, you have a customizable home, there is fishing, and eventually the restoration of the hub town into a really nice living place. Honestly, this just looks really cool to me. And between this, Last Epoch, and so many other projects, I think there's a very strong ARPG renaissance going on right now. If, though, you want your action RPG to be a bit less isometric and a lot more final, then FF16's second DLC, The Rising Tide, is coming out on the 18th. So this is the second part of that game's expansion pass. The first part, which was called Echoes of the Fallen, it didn't really set the world on fire in terms of narrative or character work. What it did do, though, is give people a challenging but rather short dungeon, which I suppose was good. Also, some more traditional boss fights, which would be nice, as opposed to the original Icon Jewels. So it wasn't as big of a thing. What is a bit bigger, though, is this one, The Rising Tide. It at least seems to be much more substantial. It's got a whole new game region to explore in Mysidia. It's got more world building in the role of the bearers and essentially the answer to what happened to the missing Icon fight from the core game, Leviathan. Gameplay-wise, more weapons, more abilities, more enemies, side quests, a new region, but definitely it's also recognizing that people love the action combat. I mean, yes, it can start off rather simple. If you're trying to really hypergame FF16, there is quite a bit in there, and at the very least, I mean, it is one of the most visually stunning combat systems that I've seen. So if you like that, well, they've added another challenge dungeon. It's called Kairos Gate. You unlock it by finishing the DLC, and when you're in it, you're essentially proving your skill against 20 waves of enemies. Overall then, I think this has got really nothing to change your mind if you didn't care for the base game, but if you liked FF16, this does appear to be a more well-rounded slice of more FF16. Now, on the 22nd, we've got Dead Island 2. This is actually out, but it is now escaping from Epic Games Store exclusivity, and it's a weird one. After years of delays, I really don't think there were any hopes for this game, but Dam Buster Studios actually managed to pull it off. Now, it's no crazy 10 out of 10. It will not set the world on fire, but what it is pretty damn good at what it sets out to do. So if you want some more Dead Island, you'll probably have a great time with it. Next, we've got a game that actually will have quite a lot of meaning to people. It originally came after a very successful Kickstarter. On the 23rd, Auden Chronicles 100 Heroes comes out, and it's the spiritual successor to the classic Suikoden RPGs, even down to the original creator, Yoshitaka Murayama, taking on the role of scenario creator, and doing so just before his tragic passing earlier this year. And I do think that means that this game will actually have quite an impact on people. Now, in terms of what it's offering as a video game, well, it is a classic turn-based combat RPG. It's the classic style of collecting characters, this time more than 100 of them, and in a year of remakes and remasters and new entries in classic franchises, it's actually nice to see this take a different path, because it is a spiritual successor that is under the control of people who built the original. And I think what's really making it stand out in those previews as well is that this is a game that actually seems to not just be retreading what came before. Instead, it's trying to build something new upon those ideas. I think that's a laudable approach for a game like this, and for fairly obvious reasons. I really hope that this does land with people. Next then, we've got Phantom Fury. This is the sequel to Ion Fury, which was part of the early boomer shooter revival. It is a full-on 90s FPS. I mean, I love good polygon. I am loving this genre more and more. Here, we've got 20 weapons, upgrades, gadgets, and interactables in stages like, well, stage hazards, helicopters, and you're essentially blasting through a Save Mankind from Doom America road trip sort of story. To me, that all seems awesome. And as a little side thing, if you're feeling the mood for this sort of game, but you want an approachable entry to the genre, I'd really recommend Warhammer 40k Bolt Gun. It's fantastic. Next then, we've got Tales of Kanzuro, which is from Surgeon Studios and published under EA's Originals label. Now, this is a Metroidvania that is seeing a young shaman try to restore his father from the grips of the god of death. Essentially, what you're looking at is a budget-priced Metroidvania that is using Bantu myth as the basis for a game where you'll be changing up your combat styles between moves that are more aggressive with a sun mask, and then moves that are more about controlling the stage with a moon mask, and then using new abilities to traverse through a 2.5D map, the sort of thing that's textbook for the genre. Honestly, man, there have been so many really damn good Metroidvanias within the last, like, 6 months. It's kind of insane. So yeah, you guys are drowning in good games, and the good news here is this was on Steam Next Fest, and the demo was really strong. So, looks great, but I do have another question, and that is, what about crabs? Yes, crabs, because the next game is another crab's treasure. It is from who other than developer Aggro Crab, and it releases on the 25th. Basically, they've went and done a Crab Souls-like. And I suppose as much as, yes, the meme that everything evolves into a crab eventually is funny, it might take FromSoft a while to actually reach there. Here, though, you're playing as a hermit crab who just wants to get its shell back. So who knows, maybe we're looking at a rather crab-like John Wick revenge thing. But honestly, this looks like a more approachable entry to that genre. I could see there being jank. I am certainly hopeful. I think just looking at some of the stages, some of the graphics, it does bring me back to the PS2 era, but in a way that I do find to be quite pleasing. Now, our next title is Sandland. And this is also a game that is taking on extra meaning because of the passing of Akira Toriyama, of course, the creator of the manga. Now, this story is from him, and it actually ties into this year's anime release. And basically, to take its setting, it's a world of desert dunes where humans and demons are attempting to survive as water is scarce and, well, deserts are full of monsters. Hearing that, you probably think it's Dune, but anime. It's not that. It is far more Mad Max by way of tanks, which is awesome for a video game. And that's what this is, an open-world action RPG built around the iconic vehicles of Toriyama, lovingly rendered in the style that made them famous, which does mean visually, like, this should be what people are looking for. Now, you've got full control over customizing your vehicles for battle and for traversal in a big open world. The early previews are also suggesting that basically the depth of control that players actually have here, that is something that longtime fans of this setting will be able to appreciate. Now, obviously, we'll have to see if the gameplay actually lives up to the legacy of this property, but I'd say that at least visually, this is definitely a game that is understanding what people want from this adaptation. I really hope it goes well. Our next game then is a whole new Saga game that is pitched as being fully standalone. It is Saga Emerald Beyond. This is framed as being a perfect jumping in point for a year of great RPGs. Essentially, the Saga games often stand out from the rest of the pack because of their story structure. Essentially, you are crafting your own path through a non-linear narrative and leveling flow, kind of creating an experience that's unique to you. Like, honestly, Pretty cool. Now, for this one, you've got 6 protagonists jumping between 17 very different worlds. That's essentially the core prospect of the game, and the story then, of course, changes and develops based on how and when each story element is actually reached by you as you're playing. That just sounds awesome, and in a year where we've seen multiple great RPGs releasing from well-established Japanese devs, sick. This does feel like Square Enix actually trying to make sure that all of their fans are catered to. Our next game, though, is the second most wish-listed game on Steam. We've all heard about it for a long time. It releases into early access on the 26th. It grew from a solo dev posting prototype GIFs on Twitter many years ago to where it is now, and that game is Manl Lords. It looks to be the quintessential village builder. Just lovingly, authentically rendered Central European maps, where essentially you're going about as minor noble, raising up villages, directing farms, and eventually engaging in minor border skirmishes. And that latter part really is the killer app here. This is a game that, amongst people who love Mount & Blade, who love Total War, yes, it's not the scale of Total War at all, but the way that you're kind of mobilizing your standing forces to protect your town, it's really neat. Now, it's that latter part that's the killer app here, because when you're mobilizing your forces to protect your town or to raid a rival, you're actually shifting into Total War style real-time combat that basically will have, your blocks of armed peasants slamming into each other. The graphical detail is just really damn impressive. So this is a specific combination, I think, of mechanics that means that if you're interested in Total War, it appeals to you. If you're interested in city builders, it appeals to you. This is a game that is just, well, I mean, come on, it's the second most wishlisted thing in Steam. It has had an incredible ability to reach out there and get noticed. Of course, though, this is a early access release, so don't immediately expect it to dethrone the major players from day one. I think, yes, do see this as an extremely promising prospect. If you want your gameplay to be a bit more immediately visceral, we do have Stellar Blade that's releasing the very same day. There has been a lot of conversation around the aesthetics behind Stellar Blade, which is an upcoming action RPG directed by the longtime character artist Kim Hyung-tae, who, must be said, is rather partial to a spot of ass. Now, essentially the demo of this game has been quite loved by some, a little bit more mixed for others, but with games like this, so much of that can depend on, well, what stage of the game you're playing, how much through your moveset are, how comfortable you are with it, and then, of course, difficulty, right? Difficulty really does make or break games like this, so we'll have to see. Gameplay-wise, though, they're clearly taking some inspiration from Nier Automata. Basically, robotic hero, navigating post-apocalyptic world, stylish combat tricks, and it overall seems to be enough that PlayStation have picked this actually up. They've picked it up for exclusive publishing on their platform. Of course, we do have a bit of a dearth of Sony first parties right now, so it's kind of interesting they decided to pick that up, perhaps thinking it would be just a well-targeted thing to bolster their lineup. Obviously, time will tell, we'll have to see. And speaking of time, it's time for our final game, which is Xbox's final entry into their whole putting their games in other consoles thing that they're doing, which I mean technically does include, Grounded, right? Anyway, it's Sea of Thieves. Basically, Sea of Thieves has been shooting up the PlayStation pre-order charts kind of massively. Sea of Thieves is one of those games, yes, it absolutely exploded on Twitch for a while, but it does appear to have been a true sleeper hit. If we have that, combined with, by far the largest console install base, this actually could be a pretty major, new lease of life for this game. Essentially, it is a sandbox that has only gotten more full of toys as time has went on. It released in a very bare-bones state, but by now it is, by all accounts, an excellent game that people love. So, what are you playing? I'd say my top picks this month, what I'm looking forward to the most is Manor Lords, then with a dash of Phantom Fury, No Rest for the Wicked, Infection Free Zone, and Harold Halibut. So yeah, that's more games for the backlog, because as much as, yes, I know there's countless stories that are pointing and laughing at gaming or rough things going on in the industry, and we do have to talk about those things, but amidst talking about that, it cannot be denied that this industry's output is incredible. I mean, just look at this month. Do you have massive AAA Sony first parties? No, you don't. You have some AA's, you have some indies, but a real, just interesting crop of games. So I love where the medium's going. And next, check out this episode of Roundup. We've got a few really great topics in it that actually feel a bit different and cut to some deep industry truth. So click the box when my head disappears, and I'll see you over there.